Coming up on this edition of the Black Vault Radio, astronomer, artist, and author David Aguilar steps into the vault. Armed with a passionate and diverse scientific background, David joins me to explore the mysteries of the cosmos. We dive deep into the theory of intelligent life in the universe and the idea that quite possibly they are visiting Earth in the form of UFOs.
What's the possibility about bending space? So, in fact, the distance from one place to another is not a linear distance like we think of when we drive from Chicago to Cleveland, but instead, you bend the space, so it's just a jump. What was it? It passed right over the top of us, going incredible speeds. What was it? And ground says, we have no idea. This is crazy. We have no clue what these things were. And they were looking at military reports, multiple reports. So there is an odd unknown. He did not have to stay in the flow of the scientific endeavors everybody else was doing. He had freedom. He had the chance to look at this as a scientist and say, wow, the data is showing me something bizarre.
All that and much more. So stay tuned. The Black Vault Radio is about to begin. More than 20 years ago, I began a journey. My quest for the truth. My name is John Greenewald, and I have hammered the United States government with Freedom of Information Act requests trying to get answers. I have more than 2 million pages of declassified documents for you to download at theblackvault.com. Now, I attempt to dive even deeper and talk to some of the most brilliant minds on this planet. No government secret is off limits, and no question is off the table. All I aim for is the truth. This is the Black Vault Radio. That's right, everybody. This is the Black Vault Radio. I am your host, John Greenewald Jr. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and making this your podcast and radio show of choice. I know and always make mention of it that there are tens of thousands of other choices. So if you keep coming back, thank you for that devotion. If this is your first time, welcome to the show. Hopefully you'll stick around and even subscribe via all of those buttons. If you have no idea where to find those buttons to subscribe, just know that I have a show notes page which links to everything that my guest and I talk about, and that is at www.theblackvault.com/show notes. Now, the reason why I point you there is that will link over to the website and all of the books, which I highly recommend, of my guest, Mr. David Aguilar. Now, David is a world-renowned astronomer, scientist. He is well-versed in multiple facets of science. He has worked with Harvard University. He has worked on the New Horizons Pluto mission with NASA. He has done an extraordinary job in his career educating the public and really contributing to some of the most amazing discoveries in science. So it's an honor for me to bring him on. But more so, he has agreed and actually wants to talk about some of the anomalies in space, leading all the way to the notion and idea that quite possibly intelligent life is visiting Earth. So we deal with mysteries. We're going to deal with mysteries of the cosmos. We're going to deal with alien life, UFOs. He says it is all fair game. So I'm looking forward to bringing him on in just a couple of minutes. Now, there is a lot to deal with here on the Black Vault Radio before we get going. And what I've decided to do, because I just sat down and was recording the introduction to my show before I bring David on, and realized that there's a lot to deal with when it comes to news this week about the United States Navy and the headline that they are now drafting UFO guidelines to take UFOs more seriously. Now, that is an amazing revelation when it comes to this particular topic. Obviously, David, my guest, and I will be getting into that very topic here in just a few minutes. But that's big news this week. If it is all true and it is all what we want it to be, that's pretty encouraging and pretty exciting. Now, I've decided to go ahead and make a different episode for you all, outlining a very important discovery that I made today, which is, as of the recording of this, exclusive. Not a single other news outlet has reported it yet. Now, that may be in an hour change from in an hour from now. That could be, maybe never addressed. But the reason why I want to stress it is it's actually pretty cool news when it comes to the reporting guidelines and word that I just got directly from the Navy today. So in lieu of doing a half-hour introduction here before we bring David on, out of respect for his time and out of respect for all of you, I want to make sure that we get to David right away. Stay tuned for that other episode wherein I will jump into giving you the details of what all those Navy guidelines may actually mean. But on top of that, get into my discovery of what happened here on April 26th, 2019. At this point, no one else is reporting it. Who knows how long that will last, but at least I wanted to try and bring it to you first because it is important, it's exciting, and it's encouraging. So stay tuned for that. That will drop later today. But for now, I want to bring on one of the most passionate people I think I've ever met. And I'm not saying this because he's going to be a guest on the program, but actually one of my favorite humans on planet Earth. There's only a select few of them. David Aguilar is definitely one of them. He is coming up on the TBV Dialogues segment. Stay tuned. On this episode's TBV Dialogue segment, I welcome David Aguilar. David's an internationally recognized astronomer whose expertise lies in heightening the fascinating connections between the universe, nature, and ourselves. He's an author and space artist of 8 National Geographic and 3 Random House award-winning books. That includes this year's stellar adventure, 7 Wonders of the Milky Way, a lively galactic journey through our home in the cosmos. In June of 2019, National Geographic releases Luna, the science and stories of our moon, to coincide with the 50th anniversary of man's walk on the moon. You can catch David on screen as a contributor and space artist for the History Channel's Universe series, the Science Channel's NASA's Unexplained Files, and NHK's Cosmic Front. He also appears on many others. He is the former director of science information and public outreach at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. In 2015, and then again in 2018 through 2019, he was part of the media team for NASA's New Horizons mission. There's even an asteroid named after him. Let me welcome to the show, Mr. David Aguilar.
Hey, John, how are you?
I'm good, and it is an absolute pleasure and honor to have you on the program. I've wanted to do this show for a long time. I want to give the audience just a very quick background on how you and I met. We met, actually, when I was producing for History Channel's The Universe, which is in your biography and in my intro for you, and I came across your work, and I'm not just saying this, I have always been astounded at your ability to educate the public. Not only for the show that I did for History Channel, but you have such a passion and you have such a way about you to help people like me who don't have the science background that you do. I mean, you're an accomplished astronomer and very well versed in multiple fronts of science, but you help people like me understand it all. So it really is a pleasure and an honor to have you on this program.
Well, John, I appreciate being here, and I have to say I had a lot of fun doing that show with you. So it's a pleasure from both sides.
Very good. Well, that show, for those who aren't sure what we're talking about, it was part of the Universe series called Alien Faces. And I literally was given a show with a one-sentence synopsis. If life exists on another planet, What does it look like? And so I joke around about it, but with my present company, it's hard for me to even joke about this. But I've always said I had to get my my degree, my PhD in astrobiology and astrophysics in like 3 days, simply because I just didn't understand any of this. And I created a hypothetical chunk of the universe. That's what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to do it. And Mr. David Aguilar here joining me was instrumental in creating that chunk of the universe. But more than all else, the actual creatures, the aliens, the physical beings that lived on these planets with different environments, he brought those to life. And for those who haven't seen the show, you got to watch it. So that's my shameless plug. But that's how David and I met. And again, with just well-versed in multiple facets of science. David, let me ask you first, as I do with all my guests that appear first time here, give me a little bit about your background. I mean, how did you get into science, and what did you ultimately want to do if you're not doing that right now?
I got into science very early as a young kid. I mean, I'm in love in the broad sense of science. It doesn't matter whether, it was collecting insects and pressing butterflies in my bedroom, or, building rockets and launching them out in the fields at school. It was building telescopes and looking at the stars and the moon. The universe fascinates me and everything that's in it, because that's all that exists that we really know about, and we're part of it. And we float through space in this tiny little world we call Earth, our home, our security, but it's a big universe out there. And the mystery and the wonderment, if you just look around, it's around you everywhere. Mm-hmm. And once you get involved with that, you realize how much bigger it just might be out there.
And when you were a kid, as I watch my now 5-year-old, who has multiple copies of your book, by the way, as I watch my 5-year-old grow up and see what he's fascinated in, did you have that fascination as a kid and you wanted to grow up and say, I'm going to be an astronomer?
No, I knew I was going to grow up to do something in science. I might have been a teacher. I might have been a marine biologist, actually, for quite a while. In my younger years, I was scuba diving in Monterey Bay in junior high school, seeing things underwater that I never could have imagined. So I was very broadly spread out and participating in different areas, having a sense that someday it would be part of my life. Of course it would be, and I really didn't know what it was going to be, but I was very open to possibilities and things that might come along. And that's what I'd say to young people today. Be open. There are possibilities everywhere. Just somebody's got to do it. It might as well be you.
Mm-hmm. And you started working directly with Harvard University. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is how I kind of interpreted not only how we met, but how I interpreted your role there. And it was really taking the science that you knew, the science that they were coming up with, but making it make sense to the general public. You were the translator, but I don't want to demean that role that you had. But in essence, the science translator, right? For making people like me understand what everyone was talking about?
Yes, it's a very unique role, and I don't look upon it as being demeaning at all. Scientists are there to make small discoveries. We're living in the day where the Herschels, the Galileos, the Einsteins, they may be behind us. Now it's teams working together, and they work in tiny incremental steps. And one of the things scientists never want to do is reach a conclusion, because the conclusion down the road may prove to be wrong, mm-hmm. and they don't want that hung around their neck like an anchor that they're walking around. And they said, this is it, and this is the way it's going to be, and then it changes, because science always changes. So for me, one of the fun aspects is taking a look at this absolutely stunning research that is going on. First of all, understanding it and understanding what it means, but then asking the types of questions that you and me and anybody else out there would ask, because scientists don't consider those questions. They can't. They don't want to be branded with a certain direction that they went that may change. So consequently, what I got to do was read these crazy long scientific papers and ask these really dumb, stupid questions that all of a sudden I would say to the scientists, so in other words, if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're really saying is this. And they would look at me like a cow watching a train going by on the tracks and say, I never thought of that. Oh my God, it's true. I never thought of that. And the point that they never thought of is what you, me, and everybody else wants to know. So that was the fun part. And that's really how, for me, it became a game to take a look at these intricate scientific papers and say, what's in there that the common person would love to know, that it relates to their life. It may change the way they think. It's hidden in there. Let's find it.
And you came in 2015 and then again in 2018, as I said earlier, you were part of the New Horizons team. Can you give everybody just a little bit of insight on what you did there?
Sure. What I got to do on the New Horizons team, especially on the Pluto side of the mission, I came in as an outside media contractor, but I got to hire 5 of the best science journalists in the country to work together to publicize this incredible mission that had started 9 years earlier. We had traveled billions of miles through space. We had an opportunity of just minutes to fly by Pluto at 38,000 miles per hour and photograph a distant object that had only appeared as a pinpoint on photographs since its discovery. And here we were discovering new lands, we were exploring a part of our solar system we'd never seen before, and then what our team got to do was turn around and turn those stories out for the world to understand. And so one of the funniest things that happened to us is that we were told by NASA that on the day of flyby, we shut the NASA website down with too many people trying to go online to look at the news. And we thought, oh my God, NASA's going to kill us. And they came back and said, oh my God, that's never happened before.
Yeah.
Do it again. I mean, that was unreal. So many people shared in this story. So when you saw those pictures and you read those stories, my team, that's where they were coming from, of course, with the scientists and the project director, but that's the role we got to play on that mission.
Yeah, I remember some of the... No, sorry. Yeah. I remember some of the press releases about that. It was so amazing to watch, and some of the photographs that accompanied it. I saw your photograph in there a couple times, walking around that you got in. You were photobombing everybody, but it was an amazing story. It's good to know that there was such public interest.
Well, it's true, and it was a milestone in discovery for the human species that we had gone that far from our own little planet and reached out towards the edges of our own solar system.
Such an amazing story, and the reason why I wanted you to give everybody a little bit of background is because that you've been gracious enough to be very open to speaking with me about topics that scientists, astronomers, those with that type of a background are a little bit afraid to touch, and that's the UFO phenomena. I use the plural. I believe there's multiple facets to it, but the whole idea of intelligent life in the universe, and can they get here? Would they be here? And if they are they visiting our skies? And all of those really kind of crazy questions. So as the human race does reach out, and we're stretching towards Pluto and well beyond our solar system now. As a scientist, as an astronomer, when you look up, let me start away from UFOs per se, but talk about intelligent life. Do you believe that there is intelligent life in the universe? We'll start there.
Yes, absolutely.
So
simple as that.
It's as simple as that. Okay. So now let me ask you in a broader sense. Does the scientific community, are they as convinced? Are they as simplistic with the approach that said, yes, there's intelligent life?
I would say it's split about 50-50. And where it's split is there's one side that says, yes, there's going to be intelligent life out there. The other side says, yes, there's going to be life out there, but we're not certain it lasts long enough for intelligent life to evolve on those planets. So they're open to life in the universe. It's not sterile, it's not dead, it's not a wasteland beyond the Earth. But what type of life might be out there, that's up to debate, because we have no indications at this point that, somebody is sending us messages every night trying to get a hold of us.
So with your belief with an intelligent life being out there, why do you think those scientists on the 50% end that don't believe, why don't they? And I'll say this as a layman, the reason why I ask this, and I don't have the background, but for me, it's like such an obvious thing that they're out there, not necessarily coming here. That's a different topic we'll get into, but that they're out there. I mean, like, isn't it just, it's a little cliche, but isn't the universe just too vast for us to be alone in this? Is there a consensus of why they don't believe, or is it just because there's no evidence of it?
John, there's multiple reasons, and all of them are very good reasons. Let's just go through the checklist really quick.
Yeah.
There's the first group that says, all right, there will be life out there, but there is no indication that it will reach the level of what we call intelligence, because there are a crazy set of circumstances here on the Earth that after 4.5 billion years, we show up. However, if 65 million years ago that asteroid had not wiped out the dinosaurs, more than likely we wouldn't be here. And we're not certain the dinosaurs would have evolved into intelligent creatures. They might have. There were some pretty smart ones. And one, Stenonyctosaurus, looks like a human being. It stands upright. It's about 5 feet tall. It has arms sort of like ours and legs. So maybe it might have reached it. There's a second group that says, in the evolutionary process of life, there is no reason for intelligent life. It may be a strange turn in life on a planet that creates it, but it's not the ultimate goal of evolution. Evolution is to survive. Evolution is to adapt to your location and survive. And if we want to look at the most successful life on Earth, everybody, of course, thinks it's humans. It's us. Look, we drive cars, we fly airplanes, we go to the moon. We tweet back and forth. Yeah, we're the most successful creatures on this planet. Truth is, no, we're not. The most successful living things on this planet are the bacteria that inhabit this planet, because they've been here since almost day one, and they've survived. 99% of all the life that has lived on Earth is gone. We're the 1% right now. So we may be a passing fad. We may not make it in the near future. An asteroid may come and wipe us out. A whole series of opportunities. So consequently, they look at life and say, it's going to be out there, but we don't have any proof that says once evolution starts, after, give it 4 billion years, you're going to have smart thinking creatures that think cell phones are a really cool idea. It may not happen at all.
Now, some of those things that you mentioned are, not all of them, but some seem to be variables in what we know as the Drake equation. Is that still a going thought process on calculating those intelligent life forms out there, or is that in itself now kind of dated and obsolete?
It's dated. It's a little obsolete. And when Frank Drake came up with this idea that he could do a mathematical formula and figure out how many stars would be like our sun, how many stars would be about the age of our sun, how many stars would have Earth-like planets around them, how many of those Earth-like planets might have intelligent life on them. This was just, I think he did it on a tablecloth in a restaurant one night as he was writing this all out.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, he did not know how many Earth-like planets there might be out there. He had no idea how many sun-like stars might really be out there, because those surveys hadn't been done yet. They were done in later years. And once they were done, a lot of those numbers began changing because we had some real data to put in there. He was doing just a fun mental exercise to figure out the possibility. Today, we still don't know if that formula works. We're looking at other possibilities that he had never considered. So consequently, it was a scientist activity, just like you would sit down and sketch out a porch you think you're going to build onto your house 10 years from now, and then things change. So that's what it was. We refer to it, but there are no hard numbers that give us any distinct idea of what might be out there.
But before I move on, I just want to ask you something that I've struggled with for a long time. And as a scientist, I want to ask you, how do you define intelligence? What's the gauge and the factor?
Oh, that's a really good question. How do you define intelligence? And I'll go one further. Does it mean all intelligence thinks and processes information like we do? Well, come on. Whales have bigger thinking brain areas in proportion to their bodies than human beings do, and we haven't a clue if they're intelligent. We think they are. Mm-hmm. We think they have languages. We think they communicate with each other. But I'll tell you one thing. I've never seen a building built by a whale, and I've never received a tweet from one. So trying to understand what intelligence is it's crazy. We don't really know. I mean, we don't know how the human brain works. How do we store information? How do we retrieve it? Yeah. Is that information correct? Has it changed over time? We, of course, write things down, which other animals don't do. So we can go back and take a look, and that becomes our knowledge base. That's intelligence. But we simply don't know what intelligent means. And what the frightening part is, of course there's going to be other intelligent creatures out there, but they will have sensed their universe differently. They will have sensed their world differently. Their intelligence will be different. They may not think along a linear way like many of us do here, step 1 to step 2 to step 3. They may jump from step 1 to step 9 in ways that we can't even imagine how they reach that conclusion. Mm-hmm. Different eyes, different ears, different senses capability will change their intelligence. It'll change the way they see the universe. And so consequently, intelligence maybe is the ability to sense our mortality, the ability to place ourselves in a location in the universe, the capability of changing our planet physically, going around and adapting it to meet our needs. Maybe that's what intelligence is. But on a broader scale, we have no clue. I mean, what does a bumblebee think in your yard? It's got a brain. What was it thinking? Oh, God, I left the keys in the house this morning. Oh, no, the water's running. Oh, I got to go back. What do all these different creatures on our planet think? What does your dog think when it gives you that certain look? Oh, God, how many times do I have to train this human to put my water dish over here? I don't know. What is intelligence?
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you the question. I knew you'd have a fun answer, but it's such an amazing thing to think about because we only define it as human beings. For me, I think the most intelligent creature out there is an ant. I don't know if that's scientifically sound to say, but I am fascinated. I really am. My wife wants to kill me because I am fascinated by ants. I made her watch like this 2-hour documentary on ants one time. I just thought it was
You're pushing it.
Oh man, boy, I thought I'd get divorced at that point. But she, God love her, she sat through it, and I think wanted to strangle me at the end. But I'm just like, eating popcorn, eating it all up. I love that stuff. But anyway, so
wait, stop here for a second. Let me give you an even funnier example because I like termites.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool. Okay.
I mean, ants are weird because they do a dance. They leave odor, odor sensors around for other ants to follow. But termites, these things are living in what would be comparable to us to 50-story buildings in some of these termite mounds that they build compared to the size of their bodies. So these are 50-story buildings. And the most critical thing about a termite mound is keeping the temperature within about a 6-degree range. Mm-hmm. It gets too hot, the little eggs cook. It gets too cold, they freeze. And here's the weird part, and we have no clue how this works, that when it gets too warm at the top, all of a sudden, termites at the bottom of the mound are opening up windows and doors to let cool air in so it comes in through the bottom and circulates out through the top.
Wow.
Okay, that happened. But guess what? There's no telephones in that building. There was no communication from the top floor to the bottom floor, but the bottom floor knew suddenly it had to open things up. It had to ventilate that area. We don't know how they communicate. We don't know how that information traveled up and down. And there certainly weren't runners. There's not elevators in those things. But How were they communicating? Odors? Mental telepathy? What is the signals that they were sending that says, hey guys, time to open the windows or else? So that's a different form of intelligence, similar to ants in the way they respond as a colonial mind. I mean, they're a colonial mind. They all think together as one big mind, like the Borg.
Now I'm going to have to binge watch every termite documentary that I can find, and I may be calling you soon to sleep on your couch. Those are amazing stories, and that leads me to, as you punch the fact that science and scientists really don't understand everything on our own planet. Going back to the cosmic scale, obviously we talked about your connection with New Horizons. But there's a lot of missions out there. I wish we heard about them more on our nightly news, but a lot of missions from NASA doing amazing things and achieving amazing things. In that process, there are things that they are seeing that they don't understand. And the scientific community sees those anomalies a little different than what I'll call the UFO community, two of which recently were, and I'm probably going to botch the pronunciation, but is it Oumuamua? Is that how you pronounce that?
Yes. Yeah.
That's one, and Tabby Star. That's right. Now, I'm not going to make a claim on either one of those, but I know you and I have talked about Tabby Star prior with these. Do you mind if I ask you about those two anomalous things, and if science has answered it and it's just internet legend and lore, or are there really anomalies about these two objects? And if you could preface it with a little background on what the controversy is, just for those who aren't aware.
Sure. Let's start right now with the recent question of whether or not a spaceship or a space probe passed through our solar system. We were at the edges of our solar system. This actually came out of Harvard. Avi Loeb is one of the theoretical scientists there who came up with this idea. And what I love about Avi, working with him before, is that he's pretty open-minded. And he's not restrained by some of the barriers that other scientists might be. And what he simply said is this: look, this object, this strange, long, needle-shaped object, came through our solar system, passed through, and now is moving out of it. And normally you might say, oh, it was an asteroid, oh, it was a comet, or it was a Kuiper Belt object. And that's true. 99% of the time, that's what it should have been. But what was weird about this one was its shape. It was extremely long, kilometers in length. It almost looked like Rendezvous with Rama, with Arthur C. Clarke in his book about this ship that comes into our solar system, and we go explore it, and then it moves on. But the second thing about it that was so peculiar was its orbit and its speed and the direction it was moving. It had come from the outside of our solar system. It hit the fringes of our solar system, and then it moved on. Could it have been something that was thrown out of another solar system? Possibly, but because of the shape and the speed and the direction it was moving, Avi said, you know what? This might have been a spaceship probe coming through. It looking to our solar system on its way out on another journey. Now, that was radical for an astronomer to say, an astrophysicist, but he did. He said, look, I'm just looking at this data, and it's a possibility. And that's what really got people thinking. Have we been visited by a probe that probably had been launched tens of thousands of years ago that is just surveying this part of the solar system? Maybe. So that's why it really got people concerned and people talking about the possibility that there might be intelligent life out there. And yes, they would send probes. Come on, we want to send them to Alpha Centauri. We want to send a ton of them to Alpha Centauri. So that's how that story got started. It hasn't been resolved. And nobody knows the answer because we can't get out there and climb aboard that object to see what it looks like. It was moving too quickly and it's gone. We don't have that capability. But what it did is open a door that said, this is a possibility. This is another explanation. Now, what scientists love to do is say, here's my explanation. Prove me wrong. And we don't have enough information to prove him wrong. So maybe Avi Loeb was right. Maybe this really was a visitor that came through and then moved on.
So even still, it's safe to say that science just has no idea why this object moved and was shaped the way it was?
Nope. No, we don't. We do not. And there is no research that was nimble enough to turn right around and study it further. We just picked up the data on it. And that's why, at this point, it's an unknown. It's a big question mark.
That's amazing. I thought I swore that there were a lot of headlines saying that they put all that controversy to bed, but I guess that is not true.
Well,
I guess it depends on who you listen to.
They have no new data to turn around and follow up on it. So at this point, they put it to bed. They can't go any further with it. But it remains a strange possibility and something that we can't explain. Let's just leave it that way.
Yeah. And before we move on to like Tabitha's star, if you don't mind, are there any other objects that you're aware of that scientists look at and scratch their heads that much? Or is that really a rarity?
Well, no, that's a rarity. But then again, we've uncovered these crazy things called fast radio bursts.
Yeah.
That initially we were finding that we would find one of these bursts of energy, X-rays and gamma rays that would come from a part of the universe beyond our Milky Way. And then we'd find one over here, one over there. But now we've found a couple that are repeating. And if this is a cosmic event, like a star blowing up or a neutron star colliding or collapsing, it should not be a repeating event. And yet, we are still picking up a few of these from single sources that begs the question, is this somebody out there sending a beacon message into the universe, just spreading it across the universe, hoping somebody responds? Or is this a new type of stellar object we've discovered that we at this point don't have data to tell us what it is, but it's just another natural phenomenon? So we have these things that pop up. And again, it needs bigger telescopes. It needs the James Webb Space Telescope to fly. It needs these big, huge ground-based observatories we're building right now in Chile and Hawaii to come online. And they will. In 2022, 23, we may get some answers to some of these questions. But for right now, we're using what we have and kind of wondering what we've got.
I'm glad you brought up fast radio bursts. I've always been fascinated by that, and especially the recent news. I mean, it's just in the last couple months, I think, was the most recent that they discovered that they're scratching their heads.
Yeah.
Can I poke and prod a little bit on your personal feeling on what they may ultimately be?
Well, I'd like somebody out there generally broadcasting saying, we are here. Can you read me? Anybody out there? Anybody? But then again, this comes back to intelligent life.
Yeah.
And it comes back to broadcasting who you are and where you are when we know in the history of this planet that a few years difference in technologies can destroy a civilization that's a few years behind you in technology.
Yeah.
So is it wise to go out there and broadcast that you are here when somebody else picks it up and they're a little bit further advanced than you are, and they say, oh, hey, look, here's a planet with something on it we may want to take a look at. Let's go. Giddy up. So, that's why humans, we've been doing it inadvertently. Alien Faces, our show is out there somewhere, and somebody may be picking it up light years from Earth right now, saying, what the heck is this? But we have not been sending messages on purpose, broadcasting out. And many people, as Stephen Hawking said, don't do it. That's the craziest thing you could do.
Yeah.
So we don't know what these are. And is it something out there that is intelligent, that is assured of itself enough that it can broadcast its existence? Or, like many other worlds like our own, we're kind of laying low and seeing what else is out there, but not sending any signs that say, hey, we're open for business, come visit?
Do you feel that trying to and now I'm reversing the roles, because obviously we don't know what fast radio bursts are, but reversing the roles, even though we were unintentionally doing it for many, many years, sending out signals, there became a time where we started intentionally sending out signals. Obviously, the Arecibo message was going, 100 light years away or something? The original message, right? Something to that effect. And then they obviously redid it to something closer. But that being said, there have been other messages as well. Do you think that is a good idea?
I think it is a shot in the dark, and we might as well. I mean, come on, there was so much controversy over the Voyager record album that went out there, the Voyager picture of a man and a woman, and where the spacecraft came from, and the size of the spacecraft compared to the humans. I mean, whether Voyager comes back, whether anybody ever picks it up, we will probably never know in the lifetime of our civilization, because the distances are so far. It's literally moving pretty slow to get anywhere. But somebody may be picking up some of our messages, but that would be probably between 75, 80, 90 light years away from Earth. Or they may be too weak by the time they reach out there. So actually nobody on another planet is going to get to see Rin Tin Tin or hear it on the radio. But consciously sending out high energy laser bursts would be the way to communicate. Now, let me take this all the way the other direction. In Australia, we're building the Square Kilometre Array. It's a big, huge radio telescope, over a square kilometer, almost 3/4 of a mile in size. Biggest radio dish that we've ever tried to set up. And we realized that we might be able to pick up signals from alien civilizations sent our way in space. However, we also realized that there is one wavelength that we would pick up that would indicate there is intelligent life out there, and that's the strongest one being emitted by a civilization. It's comparable to the strongest one being emitted by us on planet Earth. And do you know what that emission is? Military radar.
Wow.
Our military radar on this planet is the strongest signal that we're blasting out into space. It far surpasses television, radio, our cell phone conversations. It's military radar. And so one of the things they were saying, that if we did pick up a signal with a Square Kilometre Array, holy mackerel, it might be military radar from another civilization.
That's comforting. That's a comforting thought.
we might not want to respond right away to that one.
Yeah, I would imagine. And with our conversation about intelligence, that brings up kind of another question as we reach out into the cosmos and, debate whether or not that's a good idea or not. Is there a scientific consensus that if a civilization is out there and if they have the capability to traverse the stars, which, I'm curious to your thoughts if that will ever be a possibility in the future. But with the coming of intelligence, there's a lot of debate that will bring forth a more peaceful nation, that if they are, or a species, that if they are, much more advanced than us, then they will want to come here in love and light and disarm us and take away our nuclear weapons for our own personal safety. I personally don't buy that. But is there kind of a consensus on if there is intelligent life out there, if there is a idea about their thirst for war?
There's really no consensus, because we have nothing to base this on except what we've seen here on Earth.
Which isn't good.
Well, no, come on. Humans have invented all these things like a soul. We have invented all these ideas of life after death. We've invented all of these things that comfort us, because we do realize we're going to die. And that's a pretty scary proposition. So we've come up with all of these escape mechanisms that say, when we die, it will go on and go on and go on. And that's wonderful. There's nothing to show that. But when we talk about some of these aliens out there and we talk about their motivations, we have no clue what their motivations are.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really want to get literal, and this is going to upset some people, but if you really want to get literal, maybe what we consider God and angels are aliens that come to visit every once in a while, get the process running, and then leave to see how it works. I mean, that's one group, one explanation. Another explanation is that for life to survive in an evolutionary process as it has here on Earth, it really constitutes about three things. One, eat, find food to eat. Secondly, reproduce, make sure you can reproduce. And three, defend yourself until you can eat and reproduce. That's pretty much what sums up life on Earth. Look at wolves, look at ants, look at wasps, look at snakes, look at elephants. I mean, the whole thing is looking for food, finding the right mate to reproduce, and hanging in there so you can reproduce and eat a little bit more. That sums about 99.9% of all life on this planet. We change it a little bit. We massage it so it fits our thoughts a little bit better. So to transport that into space, we have no idea what motivates them. But if it's evolution, it's going to be reproducing, eating, and surviving. And that brings conflict. Because as you expand within your environment and you need more food, you need more mates, you're going to start moving around and looking elsewhere. And anything that gets in your way, well, too bad.
Yeah.
Hey, look what we're doing to our planet right now is we clear out all of the jungles, we clear out all of this land, we dam up rivers, we do anything we possibly need to survive, to grow, and to stay. Well, maybe that's a principle of the universe. And the idea that they're benevolent and they're here to watch over us, maybe they planted us here. Maybe we're one of their crops. We're just waiting to see how it turns out. I mean, there's so many different possibilities, and we have no data, no proof to really prove any of them.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful to think about. It's scary to think about. It is something for maybe a conversation over dinner and a good bottle of wine some night, but there's no answer to it.
Yeah. I'll buy the wine. I'll buy a couple bottles. I'll come on over. One of the things that you and Dr. Seth Shostak, Dr. Michio Kaku really taught me working directly with you all on shows like this was a notion that it doesn't necessarily have to be a biological life form. Now, I don't want to speak for you. However, what I would say that the consensus was from a lot of scientists that I sat down with, including the names I've already mentioned and quite a few others, is that if alien contact were to ever occur, it would not be with a biological being, but rather a mechanical one, an artificial intelligence. And when I first heard that idea, I thought, okay, come on, the scientific community doesn't want to believe in UFOs, but all of a sudden we're going to meet the Terminator in space. You know, I mean, that's kind of the initial thought. And then after working collectively for a couple years on a few shows for History Channel and Discovery Channel, I kind of became convinced. I'm like, wow, that really makes sense. You look at where we're at, where we're progressing, what we're evolving into. We're bridging our brains with mechanical extensions. Sure, that's, not the Terminator yet, but at some point we're going to be making an artificial machine. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that at the end of the show, one of the shows that I worked with you on, the idea was on a planet you would find machines, these working artificial intelligence machines, and that they will act essentially just like a human would if programmed to do so. So now that we're a couple years past that, what here in 2019 does the scientific community feel? Is it still the same where artificial intelligence is the kind of the direction that most people are thinking aliens might go if they're out there? Or is that now dated?
No. That's very viable. They don't usually make the association with aliens, but because they look closer here. But this is opening up a whole new realm of questions, and let's get into it because this is kind of interesting. One of the things that we see around us is that artificial intelligence is everywhere. we recognize it as a robot that walks up to us and talks to us and carries on a conversation that seems to be human. Well, that's already happened in the sense that there was a great debate as to whether or not we had reached the level of artificial intelligence where if you picked up a phone or microphone and talked to somebody in another room, you would have no idea that it was artificial intelligence and not a human. Because humans have daily experiences. We have idioms the way we speak. We have words that we use that trigger certain feelings and emotions that you can't, as we thought, teach an artificial intelligence source to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And it's not true. We've already gone through that window where now you can't tell if you're speaking to an AI source or not. I mean, everybody uses Siri. Siri's AI. Siri is deciding what it's going to answer when it talks back to you, and many people think it's a person. Little kids certainly do. Mm-hmm. And my neighbor down the street, his wife thinks he's having an affair with Siri because she always talks to him nicer than Siri talks to her. So, I mean, we've already projected on using artificial intelligence that it can communicate with us and we can't tell the difference. So that's one phase. The second phase is that we may not have, these robots that look like humans, act like humans, think like humans. Actually, we're getting closer to being the next phase of artificial intelligence as we start putting chips into our brains, as we start replacing body parts with either cloned parts or mechanical parts. We're becoming that. So actually in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years from now, if we could jump ahead, we would be stunned at the artificial intelligence and the robotics that is daily part of our lives. Yeah. It's coming so quickly now. So, comes back to this point. Does it reach a point where it becomes artificial? It can live for hundreds or thousands of years. It can rebuild itself in the way that it wants to instead of the evolutionary scale where one gives birth to another, to another, to another with slow change. Have we ended evolution on the planet Earth? Probably. Probably evolution's over with as far as the system that set up the life that we see now. So you've got these things in space, maybe, that are just a few hundred years ahead of us, and they're mostly artificial. They may not have any interest in us at all, except as, hey, isn't this something? This is what we passed through 1,000 years or 2,000 years ago. Take a look, check it out, see what it looks like. Don't interact with it because there's no reason to. It wouldn't even believe what it's seeing. That's a possibility. Or, in that sense, we have created carbon-based life has created the successor to itself with artificial intelligence and robotics. And this is something that is now wandering through the universe. And there were many people at Harvard that I had these conversations with. They were great conversations who believe that the second wave of life already exists in the universe. We're the first wave. We're carbon-based. But the silicon-based or beryllium-based or some other artificial intelligent life already exists out there. Mm-hmm. And it is not paying any attention to us at all because we're the dead end. They're the new kids on the block, and they really do not even care to or know how to relate to us. They're very different. Think very different. See the universe very differently.
The reason
why you sitting down on your knees and talking to those ants.
Yeah, which I do quite often, actually. They never talk back, but you know what? Deep down, I hope they are. Yeah, that's right. So the reason why I bring up that notion for me, just again, approaching it from someone who spent many years studying UFOs and stuff like that, the notion that a intelligence like humans would morph or merge with machines, right? It doesn't matter if it's next year or 10 years from now, even 100 years, 500, whatever. There is going to be a point where the CPU power, the processing capability of that machine, if we're not already there, is going to be far surpassing the human capability of its own brain. And then the only wild card at that point is if artificial intelligence software can be created good enough to utilize that power. And what's really crazy to think about is it actually doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be good enough to teach itself, and then it could make itself better, but that's a whole different show in itself. But the minute that happens, here's my point. The minute that happens, time and space travel become irrelevant. That is, and I'm assuming we're going down the von Neumann route, the von Neumann probe route, with how you were referring to self-replicating machines and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But the minute that you do that, we merge with the machine, then all of a sudden 1 becomes 2, which becomes 4, and then you've got millions, if not billions. Then humanity is all around the cosmos. Flipping that around, if an advanced civilization evolved somewhat similarly to us and somewhat was able to figure out merging with a machine in something like artificial intelligence, or, again, something that we've never even been able to think of, and they send these machine-like things out into the cosmos. That kind of leads me into wanting to ask you a little bit about, with all of those scientific points and scientific hypotheses on the table, is the idea of a craft that can traverse the stars really that far out?
No, it's not at all. And then again, we talk about these incredible distances, these incredible amounts of time, which probably means whatever is sent out doesn't return to its home world, because as it accelerates and moves faster and faster, time slows down for it, but it continues on the world that originated them. So, I don't. It's not like Star Trek where you leave and you come back and everybody looks the same. So that's one possibility. What's the possibility about bending space? So, in fact, the distance from one place to another is not a linear distance like we think of when we drive from Chicago to Cleveland, but instead you bend the space, so it's just a jump. You're between areas. Mm-hmm. That's a possibility. Mathematically, it works. So the idea of things moving through space out there, of course it's possible. Anything's possible, because right now, mathematically, it works. But do we physically have anything here that we can hold up and say, look what I found? Mm-hmm. It just came from Proxima Centauri, and it came to say hello. I don't know. We don't have that, I think. Maybe you could answer that better than I can. I don't think we have that.
I wish I could. No, I mean, I don't think that there's anything that I can show you. What I would then lead into asking you next is, well, there's quite a few things, is you seem to be, just based on this conversation alone, despite our knowing each other for a couple of years, but just by our conversation here for everybody listening, you seemingly are very open-minded to some of these fairly fringe ideas that that's the wrong way to say it, but that scientists that we see on television often poo-pooing this whole idea, like the Dr. Neil deGrasse Tysons and Dr. Seth Shostak's, both of whom I've worked with and I have nothing against, so I'm not trying to shine a bad light on them, but they're obviously known as being very, very skeptical about the notion that anything would even be able to travel outside of their solar system, let alone travel the stars and come here. You seemingly are very open to that. Why is there a disconnect, namely with astronomers, but why is there that disconnect between those ideas and science? Like, why is there such pushback?
Well, it may be them personally, and they may not say the same story when they're talking among friends. Mm-hmm. I can't answer that, but again, remember, science is like a prison. All the inmates think the same. All the inmates are in between these two walls. Their lives are very small as far as activities and what they're capable of doing, and it's very short. Mm-hmm. In the sense that you need to make your name, your reputation, when you get your doctorate. And for the rest of your life, you're either defending what you discovered or doing a little bit more research, but you're mostly mentoring younger people to think like you. Mm-hmm. Science can be a cage when it comes to reaching out. But if you take a look at history, when you take a look at the changes Radio. Nobody saw that coming in. If you'd been talking about radio in the 1600s, 1700s, they would have thought you were absolutely nuts. We have no way to talk about this. Television, no way to talk about it. The internet, no way to talk about it. The computers, no way to talk about it. Evolution, no way to talk about this. Of course we know God put everybody on this planet. Plate tectonics. You need people sometimes to step outside of that box because they're not confined to it. It's not where their bread and butter comes from. It's not where being a contrarian means you gain popularity among your peer group. Many of the great thinkers, have thought outside. Freeman Dyson was one. Freeman Dyson, my God, where he's traveled the universe and turned ideas upside down by what he has said and how he has approached it. So it's a different type of person, different type of soul, different type of motivation, different type of reporting structure as to who's going to hear what he says and what and or they say and judge it. So I'm not in that box. I started out as a naturalist, which sees how all systems work. I started out as a futurist, as the possibility of changes and how quickly they come. And everybody said, "Boy, I didn't see that coming." Yes, you did if you paid attention.
Yeah.
So I have that unique platform as a strong, solid scientist. I don't have to publish to keep my name out there. I don't have to go to conferences and toe the line and speak the language. And lastly, I got to tell you, sometimes saying something that goes against what the common people may think sets you apart and makes you stand out. And so I think Neil, I respect what he has done. I respect a lot for what he has done, but he's a showman.
Yeah.
Come on. He's out there to promote and sales and, he's a showman.
Yeah.
And so he approaches it from a slightly different perspective too. We all do, but I'm very open because you know what? I like change. I like challenging what I think and realizing that what I thought last year may not be right. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't shake my very foundations. It's what drives so many people is the idea that everything you know today will be different tomorrow.
Yeah.
It will be. Count on it. And you never can go back. So people who get stuck in, God, I want to go back to the way it was, you can't. You can't. You're not going to be able to do. And it's going to, what you don't like today, it's going to change again tomorrow. It's like raising a 3-year-old. Just when they absolutely are driving you crazy with something that they do, they stop and change and do something else.
Yeah.
That's life.
I wish more scientists had that concept about what you believe today is not necessarily what you believe tomorrow. It seems like a lot of people that do end up on the news broadcasts, and even in the last year and a half, again, just approaching it from a UFO community standpoint with the news breaking about, the top secret Pentagon UFO study is touted by the media. Sure. I saw Neil deGrasse Tyson was on a couple of the programs. I believe it was CNN, but one of the major networks. And so they go to him for a response. And with all due respect to him, because I do respect him a lot, and as I mentioned earlier, worked with him, I have no ill feelings. I really don't think that he has studied UFOs at all. So it's like, if you're doing a television show on baking a cake, you're not going to go to a welder to be your expert, right? I mean, that to me, it's everybody's got their own expertise. So he doesn't really seem to strike me as someone with that much of a background, if at all, with UFOs. Now, let me ask you, do you feel that you have a background in UFOs? Because you being so open, I got to think that you've looked into it enough to be comfortable saying that you're open. You know what I mean?
Okay. So I loved all the 1950 science fiction films that had UFOs in them. Earth versus the flying saucers, this island Earth. Oh, I was in love with this idea. So starting out as a young scientist astronomer, I was also directing science centers and planetariums. And one of them was a little science center in Salinas, California. And I was having a blast when I got a phone call from the police department. And they said, look, we're getting these reports of UFOs. Do you mind, you're an astronomer, following up on them, talking to the people, see what you come up with. And can you handle this for us? And I said, sure. I mean, come on, what a great opportunity. So, John, I hit the road. I hit the road out there and started talking and interviewing people who had seen these things. And I must say that 99.9% of every one of them probably had a very reasonable explanation. Mm-hmm. Come on, I've seen Venus on the horizon bounce back and forth. I've seen groups of students go nuts, jumping up and down, saying it's a flying saucer. Look at that thing move. And I said, it's Venus. Put your telescope on it. And, of course, it was Venus. So I've seen helicopters. I've seen airplanes. I've seen bolides. I've seen meteors. I have seen all sorts of things in the sky. But occasionally, I would run across a case where multiple people had cited something, and sometimes they weren't even connected together. It simply made no sense. So I went back and read Project Blue Book. I read the Condon Report. I went through all of this because it seemed that something strange was going on here. Was it military aircraft that we have that we were experimenting with? Maybe, but so many of these things made no sense. So then the next step is every time I got in line waiting for an airliner to get onto my seat, if I spotted a pilot sitting there, and many times they were jumping to different airports to pick up another flight, I'd ask them. And what I found was really weird. I would find that 1 out of 10 commercial airline pilots would share something with me that they simply could not explain. But when I worked for an aerospace corporation and I had access to military pilots, I came up with about 1 out of 6 had seen something that simply made no sense to them. Wow. And so this piqued my interest even more, because these people should know what they're seeing.
Yeah.
They have radar, they have LiDAR, they have all these different capabilities. They're in contact with ground, and they've been asked sometimes to investigate something that is up there that makes no sense, not only to the ground, but to the military, who says we have no activities in this area. So that's how I kind of fell into this, and why I kept an open mind, because I really had the chance to go out and talk to these people. They were earnest. They were not trying to make money. They were not trying to publicize. They were not trying at all for notoriety. They just wanted an answer. What the heck was this that we saw that hovered over the golf course for 20 minutes and then shot straight up into the sky and was gone? What was it? I didn't have an answer for them.
That's an amazing story. I mean, for those listening, this obviously brings up something in my mind that ties back to a Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was the scientific advisor for Project Blue Book, which you had mentioned. And it seems to me that history has proven yet again with your story, because I didn't know you'd actually go there. So I'm glad I asked you. But with Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was in as a scientist looking at evidence, and he started off as essentially a debunker and walked away as ultimately a believer and went on to do his own UFO study. There seemingly is this trend that what true scientists look at the phenomenon, not showboat, not try and get on the nightly news broadcast to say it's all bunk and this and that. But when scientists really look at the UFO phenomena and become educated about it, they're very intrigued. Do you think that will ever change with science as a whole? Because, I mean, present company excluded, it seems like the UFO topic is just a hot potato nobody wants to touch. Do you think that there's ever going to be a bridge to that gap that I asked you about earlier?
No.
No? Wow.
No.
That was quick. That was too quick.
No, it's understandable, and this is why. The role of a research scientist is to get grants to do their research. And a lot of the research that they do carries on from their earlier advisors, because that meant that they would get job security. They would have the wonderful ability to continue to do their research, because it's a very specific mind that likes to make discoveries that no human has ever made before. But there are barriers to do that, and there is barriers to the funding to do that. And the National Science Foundation has no grants for UFO studies because we don't know how to study them. So consequently, you're asking a veterinarian to do your dental work. It's not a field that they work in. It's not a field you'd want them to work on your teeth. If they're a vet. they might be a good vet, but stay out of my mouth. So those are not the people, nor do they have the financial ability to do that, nor do they have the peer support to do that, the organizational support to do that. But bet dollars for donuts that within the military organizations, there are scientists who are researching this and being paid by the military to try and figure out what in the world this is. Come on. A month ago, the U.S. Navy now has new regulations for reporting UFOs.
Yeah.
What? You told me all their programs were closed down. We're not looking at them anymore. No, they have new regulations because so many of their Navy pilots are coming across these things. And it's got to scare the hell out of them.
Yeah.
Are these drones? Are these Russian drones? Are these Chinese drones that are now invading our airspaces that have capabilities that our drones apparently do not have? I mean, that's one big question.
Yeah.
Or is this a phenomena that doesn't show up on radar? It shows up on infrared. What is this cloaking thing that we are now seeing? I mean, commercial airliners are seeing. We just had this instance in Arizona a little while back where we had somebody flying along their own aircraft and something big passed right over the top of them. They called air traffic control and said, "What the hell was that?" And they said, "We have nothing on radar. There's no military activity." So they radio ahead to United Airlines pilot and says, "Hey, by the way, check a look outside your window. Tell us if something passes over you." And a couple of minutes later, boom! What was it? It passed right over the top of us, going incredible speeds. What was it? And ground says, "We have no idea."
Wow.
I mean, we're seeing these things all the time. The videos from Navy pilots that have chased some of these things, from Argentinian pilots, from Mexico Air Force. I never thought I'd hear that one. That Mexico Air Force, looking for drug dealers, are picking up these objects that are moving in groups and breaking apart and coming back together again through the clouds that don't appear on radar, but using their FLIR, their infrared cameras, they're watching these things fly right alongside of them and pass them and come back. So the question is, what is it? It doesn't go away.
So even with everything that you brought up, and then going back to you saying that there's kind of no bridging the gap, and the Science Foundation wouldn't throw money this direction, but with the change in kind of the, I mean, and I hope all the headlines are true, because I'm always skeptical when the media is involved. I'm skeptical. But if it's all true and the Navy's producing these UFO guidelines and they're taking it seriously, if there is a trend to kind of shift towards the serious approach from the military side, you still don't think that scientific organizations may follow suit?
No, they're in different fields. They're doing different things. A person who is looking at supernova is never going to stop or have the background education to turn around and look at UFOs.
Okay, that's fair.
I mean, that's the way it works. I mean, everybody thinks scientists are open-ended. They can just go study anything that they want. Oh, my God, no. It's not that way at all. This used to really drive me crazy sometimes when I would talk to graduate students who were doing a graduate thesis on brown dwarfs, little tiny failed stars. And I would say to them, "Have brown dwarfs intrigued you your whole life?" And they would say, "No. It was the field my advisor was in, and I just needed to study a field to get my doctorate, and I thought this would be great. So now I'm studying brown dwarfs." Really? You had no passion as a kid to study brown dwarfs, or you never knew that brown dwarfs would be your life, because it will be your life after you get your doctorate. You'll study them till the day you die. So you have no chance, except like Hynek, who had gone through all of that. These were his golden twilight years. He had retired. They'd had this incident of a UFO case. He'd gone down to investigate it, thought, well, it could be swamp gas coming off the water. It rises, it glows into the air. Maybe that's what they saw. And that became the explanation for this UFO sighting. But when he started looking at the data, when he started looking and interviewing people and putting all the pieces together, bells went off. He had nobody now within his department he needed to report to. He did not have to stay in the flow of the scientific endeavors everybody else was doing. He had freedom. He had the chance to look at this as a scientist and say, wow, the data is showing me something bizarre. You know, drives me nuts about the Condon book. If you go back and take a look at the Condon book that came out of the University of Colorado that says UFOs do not exist, we find a memo from Condon before the project began that says our conclusion will be no UFOs exist.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how do you start off an investigation when you've already written the conclusion?
Yeah.
But if you go through the Condon report, there's about 16 to 17% of those sightings that have virtually no viable explanation.
Yeah.
And the researchers that were doing them, they were upset when the Condon book came out and said nothing exists, because they said, look, this is crazy. We have no clue what these things were. And they were looking at military reports, multiple reports. So there is an odd unknown. There is an odd nagging, like a toothache, that keeps popping up when you look at the data. But astronomers are not the ones to investigate this. Yeah, I hate to say it, but you know, it's scientists, investigators working for the governments that probably know more than any of us.
Two reactions. I know I only got a couple minutes left. I want to respect your time. You've been very gracious today with the amount of time that you've spent with me. But two reactions to that. So astronomers aren't the ones to look at UFOs, but that is seemingly what we are seeing as the loudest voices taking away from stories on UFOs. Again, not trying to pick on the Neil deGrasse Tysons or the Seth Shostaks of the world, but both of them are frequently kind of, trashing the topic, so to speak.
Sure.
So I won't ask you directly if you think that they're a wrong choice, because I'm not going to go there. No. But I would say that then based on what you said, they're probably not the best choice. But let me ask you, do you think that UFOs even matter then to the scientific world? Because there is something to be said that if you feel that it should stay in more of a military side, or that they know more than anything and it will stay on the military side, that if there's any breakthrough or discovery, chances are they won't tell us about
it. Well, if it stays on the military side, that's depending on who's calling the shots and what's behind it. As far as astronomers and astronomy popularizers, no, they're not going to go out on a limb when they don't have proof, when they don't have something in hand. And we don't simply know if the government has something on hand. They may not. I mean, this may turn out to be, right up there with fairies and angels and everything else. We don't know. But I take it from a different perspective. Keep an open mind. Now, I don't think there's Bigfoot walking around out there. I've spent hours looking at Loch Ness. I've never seen Nessie stick her head above the water, days and days and days looking for her. But we do have, oddly enough, physical evidence in the form of video, in the form of radar readings that say something happened here. I'm not going to say what it is. I don't know what it is. But something happened here. And it comes from very credible sources. So my point is, keep an open mind, just a little bit. Just a little bit. Because if 400 years ago somebody said, I can build a bomb that will blow up an entire city or half of the world, you never would have believed them. Because nobody was thinking that at the time. Mm-hmm. It was unpopular to think that. But things change, technologies change, capabilities change. And as we discover all these Earth-like planets around distant stars, we realize now there's between 200 and 400 billion stars in the Milky Way, and each and every one of those may have some form of Earth-like planet orbiting around them. That's our Milky Way galaxy. Our Milky Way galaxy is one of hundreds of billions of other galaxies that are out there. They've all been around for 13.7 billion years. No telling what has gone on those worlds, what has happened on those worlds. So keep a little bit of an open mind. Every day our physics changes. Our ideas of science change. New discoveries are made. New advances in artificial intelligence and robotics and cloning and all of these things change. So I have the luxury of being open-minded. I'm not wedded to any thought process that my peers have to approve. Wow. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. My last question for you is for those that are listening. If you were, and this is a consensus out there that people are frustrated. I know we've talked about it a little bit already, but people are frustrated that they feel that UFO evidence is there and that the scientific community should look at it. What would you say, other than keep an open mind? Because you said that brilliantly, and I kind of wanted to end on that note, but I did want to ask you this. What would you tell those people that are frustrated that they seem to be ignored, that the scientific community in their mind is the one that should be taking this seriously, that is not? What would you say to those people that are frustrated and they don't want to see the government get involved?
Well, the government is involved.
Yeah, whether they like it or not.
Whether you like it or not. And through the National Science Foundation, the government funds a lot of scientific research. And through military organizations, they fund a lot of research. Come on, the military helped fund the space shuttle. They fund a lot of different projects and programs because it may have an impact on a nation. It may have an impact on technologies, capabilities of other people on this planet. So they're willing to look out. Scientists, unless you are willing to crowdfund them and give them money to do the research, do not have that money to do the research. So they're not going to become involved in it. Unless somebody pays the bills for them, they're not going to do the research. They're like you and me. They like to eat, get up in the morning, put clothes on, drive their new car to work, and enjoy life. So I say that actually the best bet is our government, but they're not going to tell you.
Yeah.
They can't, especially if it impacts them in some way. So until something lands on the front lawn of the Smithsonian and comes out and has a big robot named Gort, I'm not sure we're going to know for quite a while. Mm-hmm. But here's the point. That is frustrating, of course, because everybody wants to know. They want a finality to their thoughts, to their ideas, and say, I was right, I knew it. But that's not part of life. Life is a mystery. Everything about this planet, us, why we're here, what's going on, all of this is a mystery. We just peel back one tiny little layer at a time, one tiny little layer. It may eventually come out. There may eventually be an event, something that happens that changes our thoughts and ideas. I just find it remarkably fascinating, and I don't expect scientists to give up their careers and suddenly chase this, because for some odd reason they like to eat and, live in a warm home.
Yeah.
And raise kids, and that's not going to come because the money's not there for them to do it. But don't think for 1 second within the Russian government, within the Swedish government, the Japanese government, the Chinese government, the American government, they are all looking at this, and it hasn't gone away. They will tell you what's gone away. But then again, when you see brand new regulations for the Navy in reporting unidentified flying objects, it tells us it's still ongoing. There's something going on out there. And yes, inquiring minds want to know. But maybe now is not the right time.
Well, I'm looking forward to when the right time is, David. And let me tell you one thing. Let me tell you one thing. Your passion for science has always been an inspiration for me personally. But more than that, I believe your open-mindedness serves as the epitome of what it means to be a scientist. So as someone who's not a scientist and who somebody who's interacted with quite a few of them, though, I just wanted to say thank you for being so open-minded and taking so much time with me today and talking to my listeners. I know that this is going to be a very popular episode based on not only your expertise, but really your open-mindedness and the lack of fear to address some of this stuff, which seemingly is out there for some other people. So I do want you to know, thank you from me, and on behalf of my listeners, thank you for joining me on the Black Vault Radio.
John, it was great. Let's talk again.
Absolutely. You can visit David on the internet at www.davidaguilar.org. I will link directly to all of his books that I mentioned on the show notes page. If you don't know how to get there, go to www.theblackvault.com/show notes. Thank you all for listening. Thanks to David again. This is John Greenewald Jr. signing off. We'll see you next time.